Hello, everybody. I'm Meso,
And I'm LJ.
and streaming to you live from a golden beach. This is Knack and Jay. Hello, Makuhiro City.
No. Wrong.
No, it's not. It's oh so right.
No. Wrong.
Makuhiro City is a peaceful place, free of debates and arguments and drama.
Yeah, it's because
Nothing bad happens.
Makuhiro City doesn't have a population more than 0.
That's not true.
Oh, sorry,
It
more
has-
than 1. Ooh.
It has me and X and Matoro. God rest
Meso-
her soul.
Meso, yeah, I was about to say, you named 2 people who... Where are they?
X is hanging around. I talked to him like a week ago.
No. That's fair. X is still alive. Alright, so population of 2 and 1 corpse.
Dead Matoro's not actually dead.
Her dead
Like,
is literally in her name.
she's just a ghost. We haven't heard from her in like a
Okay.
year, and before that, 2 years.
Yeah, okay, that's true. That's fair.
But yes, hello everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I want to give everybody like a minute or two to filter in because we're a few minutes behind schedule because the program was giving LJ grief. It's not your fault.
I think I figured it out for next time, but it was a taxing process.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, you
But
can
I'm
imagine.
excited to be here. I'm excited to be here. How are you doing, LJ?
I'm
Are you
tired.
having a good evening?
Yeah, I've been awake for a little over an hour, so I'm still
Oh.
more or less in the process of that waking up period.
Well, that's pleasant.
So
Did you get enough rest?
yes, I did. This is the first time in like over 2 weeks that I've woken up without an alarm. Just kind
Oh,
of
that's good.
slept because I was gone last week, and I've been working for 5 days this week. So,
So that's good because like your body's in like a routine.
mm-hmm.
Or I guess you just don't need an alarm, which is nice.
Well, no, I woke up without the alarm. I slept later than my usual schedule. My point being is I wasn't rudely awoken by an alarm.
Cool. I
Yeah,
love that.
and
That's nice.
You know what my alarm is. You know how rude it is.
It's very rude. I
And
can
it's great.
confirm.
It's fantastic.
It does the job.
Oh yeah,
That's
it
what I'll
does.
say.
Oh, it's great.
So, thank you guys for coming out. This is gonna be an interesting episode. It's a little bit different than ones we normally do in terms of structure. I'm gonna get into it. I'm gonna give everybody like a primer of what to expect. Before that, though, LJ, would you mind hitting us with those crispy plugs?
I'll see what I can do. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're interested in joining in the conversation, head on over to the TTV message boards at board.ttvchannel.com. You need to be 13 years or older, agree to the terms of service, and follow the rules, and you'll have a good time. Then, if you want to go ahead and support us, head on over to our Patreon chat at patreon.com/theTTVchannel, where you can donate as low as $1 a month and join our Patreon Discord server, as well as the Minecraft servers on the islands of Motunui and Voinui, with, hopefully, eventually, more to come. And finally, head on over to Twitter at the TTV channel, at Messanak, and at the LJ Johnson. That's JOHNSEN. And finally, if you're not interested in any of those things but still want to support the channel, which we do greatly appreciate, we do have super chats. They actually go a really long way in terms of the channel. Monetization is, generally speaking, not a suitable means of supporting it anymore. And that's for a variety of reasons. But super chats are always really, really appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, LJ. That was good. You know what I find funny? I've been watching a lot of like YouTube channels recently about like how to YouTube. And I realized one thing that we never ever do. We talk about all our extraneous stuff,
But
and
never
we
the channel.
never ask people to subscribe, like, comment, smash that like button, smash that notification bell.
It's actually a problem.
Yeah, it is.
It's
So-
not a good thing. We're doing it very wrong. whenever we
If,
don't do
yeah,
that.
it's completely backwards.
Yeah, because
so effective immediately, that's now in the rotation.
all right, I'm just gonna need to get a script ready because I try desperately to remember how it goes every time, and I've been right more often than not.
You're
But
good.
it'd be easier.
I like
to
the
just have a
free
script.
roaming aspect. Like AJ's plugs for Monkey Cast are hilarious.
Oh boy.
He's like, click the stuff and click the button and play Minecraft, and it's great.
Awesome. You know what? AJ, you're a rock star. Thank you. Good job. I like it.
Okay. So here is the issue today. This is going to be a very multifaceted episode. We're going to break this down into a few different parts. And as always, we're going to start with kind of a primer of like what we're talking about, because as usual for these, there's like an inciting incident that happened to kind of spark this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But the discussion goes way beyond the inciting incident.
Mm-hmm.
This discussion goes into like a bunch of esoteric stuff. Like by the end of it, we're going to talk about like fandom culture and authorial intent and like disassociating from authors and the very nature of the Bionicle community's relationship to Greg, like all sorts of heady, topics. And I'm going to be honest, our opinions on them, if we actually tried to be concise, which is something that we are not by choice, we could probably get all our opinions out in like 20 minutes. I can't promise it's going to be 20 minutes, but what I can promise is that at some point earlier than we usually do, I want to kind of turn the floor over to you guys, because what I'm really curious to take from all this, and what I hope this episode does, is starts a conversation. I'm less concerned about what we think, and I'm more curious what you guys think. And that's something which we're not going to close the book on in this episode. It's probably going to be a lingering topic. Just want to spark it. So, quick context for what is prompting this. I think that's a good place to start, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's wise.
We are in the process right now. Oh, no, by all
nope.
means, you go.
Nope, no. You go.
We're in the process right now of figuring out the next phase of the canon contests. The next contest, I think we've publicly announced, it'll be 2 yet.
Mm-hmm.
Last update we had was back in December. We had a talk with folks over at Mask of Destiny about like contest stuff, rules, regulations, ways to improve them. We're not done with that. We're going to have another one at some point. We basically all took a prolonged holiday break. But we're trying to get back on with that because we want to get the 2 yet contest rocking and rolling. Until that, though, there were a lot of discussions which sprung up recently on the TTV message boards about rule questions for the contest, trying to hash out specific things for the 2 yet rules.
Mm-hmm.
And on this front, I actually do think you're better suited to explain this than me.
That's fair.
So what did happen?
So there was an ongoing debate / conversation in regards to 2 yet and what weapon she would have. So for context, 2 yet contest is next, and the guidelines / restrictions for building and entering a 2 yet are essentially she has to look like a blue Toa that looks like a Toa. That's more or less it. Which we're really excited about because it's kind of a return to form. It's like, oh, okay, now we get to try the Helrix contest again. And with even fewer restrictions, so hopefully everyone will have more fun. And we also have all these great infrastructure changes made since. So that's really encouraging. However, there was an issue in terms of her weapon, because 2 yet has always and very commonly been displayed with a weapon called a barbed broadsword. And the barbed broadsword was only ever seen being wielded by an alternate universe pterodax that was impersonating alternate universe 2 yet in the Dark Mirror universe. So
Bionicle's so complicated.
that
Even you just saying that made my head spin.
So that let it open for the potential that Tuyet didn't have that in the Prime universe, because she'd never actually been described as wielding any weapon in the Prime universe. So, this debate, this conversation ran for weeks. It was long and lengthy, and eventually the arguments either in support or against Prime Tuyet having a barbed broadsword basically evened out. They were both of equal merit. They both had such good observations that it would take a third party coming in and being like, all right, we're just picking one. It was actually very impressive. So what we opted to do, and also this matters because it would decide whether or not we mandate entries having the sword.
Yeah, basically.
It is a very specific sword. It's a giant sword, and there are spikes that they go back toward the hilt. So,
the detail.
Yeah, it's a very, very specific item. So anyway, so we decided, all right, we have a very long post talking about why we try not to ask Greg about things.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, well, maybe we should in this instance. Maybe this is worth mentioning to people. Mentioning to Greg and seeing if he would respond. So we did. We asked Greg 2 questions because this had gone on for just one character's weapon. And we were like, all right, well, are there any other characters we can kind of, nip in the bud, as it were? And there were. There were the Yesterday Quest Toa, Shiara, Zarya, and Ord, who are also planned for contests, but have never had weapons described. We didn't realize that they did have weapons in the serial, because it's been ages since we read the serial, and it wasn't a common point of conversation. However,
it wasn't a common point because they didn't describe what their weapons were.
Well, yeah,
There's
exactly.
one line that says their tools were were removed.
Yeah,
taken
they were
from
confiscated. Them. So
yeah,
it was our understanding that we just straight up didn't know if they had weapons to begin with. So we asked Greg 2 questions. One, we asked him, hey, so the way it was worded was like this, and I'll read it verbatim. Hey, Mr. Farshti, I'm writing today with a few minor questions that the community is wondering about as we're planning the rules and guidelines for the next few contests. Specifically, they're regarding Tuyet and the 3 Yesterday Quest Toa. In regards to Tuyet, when Pterodax mimicked Tuyet in Dark Mirror, he used a sword. Does the Prime Universe version of Tuyet also use a sword? Secondly, the contests for Ord, Shiara, and Zarya will be coming up soon, potentially within the year. We were wondering if they carried any Toa tools in the Yesterday Quest, as the serial itself didn't specify. So, obviously enough, we were wrong. That didn't specify. It specified that they had them at some point, but we obviously didn't know what they were. But we weren't asking what they were. We just wanted to know if they had weapons to begin with. Very innocuous question. Yep. Very easy to answer.
Very innocuous, and unfortunately, we'll just nip it in the bud right now. Yes, us missing that was our bad.
Oh,
admittedly,
no.
it's been years since we've read the story specifically. All we knew is that we didn't know what weapons they had, and in the case of Tuyet, the example we were referencing wasn't specified. We mistakenly missed the line where it did say they had tools.
Yeah, and but
so before anyone posts like that was your fault,
yes. But it also doesn't matter because, and we'll get into why, because people freaked out at what happened, and it was not an appropriate reaction. So we'll get into that in just a sec. So Greg responded to both those questions, actually, really quickly. So to the first one, whether or not Tuyet used a sword, he said simply yes. Perfect.
I love Greg.
And because there's only one sword being discussed, there's only one sword in contention, and the sword that we asked about was very obviously the only sword she had, going forward, we're mandating the barbed broadsword. Tuyet, Prime Universe Tuyet has a barbed broadsword. Like, there's just,
Yep.
like, people are needling at, oh, well, you only asked about a sword. Stop it. It's the barbed broadsword. It's not, like, it's nothing else.
The intent is very clear. The authorial intent behind our question was very clear.
So, Hien answered the second question in a way we did not anticipate. We didn't ask for, we didn't inquire about. At no point were we ever seeking this information. It came willingly.
Top 10 anime plot twists of 2022 moment.
Greg's second answer was simply, and this is verbatim, to question 2. Ord has a mace, Shiara has a spear, and Zarya has a staff.
Oh my god!
Oh, no. And everyone lost their mind.
Everyone loses their mind!
It's like... So, yeah. So, again... Okay, first, there are a lot of people who think that Greg is dead. We're not gonna...
I'm surprised by the amount of people. Like,
guys,
I promise.
Greg is alright.
To my knowledge, he's in good health. We know anything going on with him.
Yep.
Death of the author is a literary term.
We'll get into that.
We'll be defining later on.
Yeah. So, everyone lost their collective minds. And I want to stress, we didn't ask for that. And the reason why it doesn't matter that we didn't, readily recall that they had weapons confiscated, the reason that isn't important is because it wasn't the question we asked. We just asked if they had weapons. That's a yes or no answer. Yes, they have weapons. No, they don't. Easy. Done. And the way we asked the question isn't leading. Contests for Ord, Shiara, and Zarya will be coming up soon, potentially within a year. We were wondering if they carried any Toa tools in the yesterday quest, as the serial itself didn't specify.
The wording specifically is any. Not what.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Was that the last bit for the context?
That's basically. I just want to say again, we didn't ask what weapons they had. He gave us that information totally of his own volition. It was volunteered. We didn't inquire. It wasn't what we wanted to know. Don't be angry at us. Stop it. It's not
I think
our fault.
What's important to do next, because I agree, is to explain why that's a problem. Because people might be listening and they might not know the intricacies of community, shenaniganry, and be like, why would people freak out about that? That seems like a very innocuous, normal question and a pretty cool reply. I mean, Greg said which weapons they used. To answer that question, we have to go on a bit of a history lesson about the Bionicle community and the role Greg plays. For those who don't know, which I heavily doubt if you're listening to this, you don't know, but it's possible. Greg Farshty is the author of the Bionicle story all the way back from the comics. He was one of the people most prominently tasked with developing the story. He was not the head of the story team.
Nope.
But he was the one who wrote the comics. He wrote most of the books. He was involved in a very prominent role in the direction of the storyline. He answered fan questions, I believe, since, wasn't it 2003 that the first Ask Greg was posted?
Yep, that's correct.
All the way since 2003, Bionicle's third year. Greg Farshty has been very intricately involved in the fandom. If you had a question about Bionicle, he would answer it. And sometimes it's just clearing up miscommunications. Sometimes it's, behind the scenes stuff. Like, was this planned from the start? What was the inspiration behind this, etc. But sometimes, very often over the years, this is weird to think about. Over the 19 years that Greg has been answering fan questions. Wow. A lot of times it's new information. A lot of times it's things that are learned from the Q&A that are new that are unknown either about the world, the characters, their tools, their masks, their functions, their appearance, their backstories, yada, 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 yada. This persisted throughout Bionicle's run and has continued after Bionicle's run. Even when Greg stopped writing the story, he continued to answer questions. And even when the story was stopped, no more chapters of the serials were being written, Greg would still provide new information about the world through Q&A. Now, admittedly, as the years have gone on, it has dried up because there isn't a lot left that he has answers to. He has said many times he more or less wrote as he went. He doesn't know, for instance, what the ending of the Yesterday quest. He doesn't know how that was going to go, but he does know certain things. And when people ask him, occasionally he's given those answers, or in some cases, like with the Earth Tribe, remember that?
Oh, gosh,
he went on big elaborations about it, providing additional background and lore.
Well,
sometimes he would answer things. Yeah.
Earth Tribe was a little more of a by the way, there's this, as opposed to a, hey, what about the Earth Tribe?
That's fair. It was basically a new thing.
Yeah. It was like brand new story content, which, when you look at it, when you actually like examine the content, it's good content, but everyone, there were a bunch of people that are still irritated.
Varying reactions. And sometimes there would be new details revealed about characters, like the infamous the Glatorian Perditus, who had no story relevance whatsoever and never appeared, was actually a secret agent for Velika the whole time. All this was revealed through Greg Q&A. Over time, there has developed a contingent of people, and I don't know yet, maybe we'll know one day, but we don't know yet whether it represents the minority or the majority. So I'm not going to say either way. I'm just going to say a contingent of people have grown increasingly frustrated with the constant drip feeding of new information. A significant number of people prefer there be some mysteries. A significant number of people don't put much validity on the stuff Greg confirms or denies. Some people even outright label it as fanon, not canon material.
So silly.
Some people just wish, it would be leave well enough alone if he's not going to actually continue Bionicle, quote unquote. Don't continue it via Q&A. And it's a complex issue to unpack because it's not black and white. There's thresholds. But that is why when it was announced, oh, hey, the Yesterday Quest Toa have these weapons, some people are like, cool, they have those weapons. I'll work them into my cannon contest mocks. Some people are irate because now that's a restriction imposed on their contests. They must have these weapons instead of leaving it up to the users to decide what weapons they have. And some people are just irate, period, because they're like, that's another thing that Greg's adding to the canon, after the fact. We wish they would just stop. The purpose of this episode is, of course, I want to give our thoughts on this whole situation, but I also want to kind of get you guys thinking. What do you think about Greg's involvement in the community? What do you guys think about Greg answering questions? What do you think about him providing new information through those questions? And just kind of mull it over as we talk. Like, what do you guys think? Because it's not something we fully subscribe to one way or the other. We've publicly said, both you and I, we each have our different little things that bug us in the past. Mm-hmm. Things that have been added to the canon that we weren't fans of. I know you've had a few for sure.
I mean, mine is ironically enough, it's 2 yet. But that was added via story serial. It was not added via an Ask Greg. Mm-hmm. I was not a terribly big fan of the rapid fire canonizations of the Toa. What are
Mangai.
Thank you, the Mangai. I didn't think those were particularly good, but I also don't. Well, we'll get into it later, but I wasn't a fan of those. But I also,
Hmm.
it's like, it is what it is now, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what's done is done. Perdidas, I know you weren't really that big of a
Uh,
fan of, at least when it came out. Maybe your
yeah,
stance has softened.
it's definitely. It's like, it is what it is. Atticus, or Attackus.
That
Atticus
was
is
another one.
better.
People forget about him, but he's in the same boat.
Yeah. Um, Also, just to let you know, Meso, I've changed the title. We had a suggestion by Chord who was listening. He said, because there were a lot of people like, oh my goodness, is Greg okay? Yes, again, Greg is fine. Anyway, his suggestion was change it to the Bionicle story and authorial intent.
Yeah, that's a
So,
good idea.
it's all done and done. So, yes, everyone, Greg is okay. I've changed the thumbnail.
And this is an interesting thing because, again, it goes beyond the inciting incident. I see a lot of people, they're like, well, this is relevant because of how it affects the contests. We're concerned because of the freedom of the contests. And that's certainly a discussion to be had that we will have. But it also goes beyond that because this has been a undercurrent in the community for a long time. Ever since I'd say it really started to become prevalent after the theme ended.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people had as much problem with it while it was going on.
Yeah.
But after the fact, I mean, I know back in my naive years, before I really understood the scope of why Greg stopped writing them, I was pretty irritated by like, if you're going to write, if you're going to come up with new ideas, if you're going to brainstorm so much in Q&A, just write the serials.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of this info would have more weight if it had actually been written about. I know Velika in particular, like, didn't he reveal some details of what Velika's plan was supposed to be?
Oh no! Not only has he released, yeah, no, he's basically laid out what Velika's plan was. Essentially, like it's actually in the trivia of his BSO1 page.
Oh, fun.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it isn't in the trivia. Maybe it was just in the body. During his time as Matoran, Velika, having concluded that the destruction of the planet was due to poor leadership by the Great Beings, developed a plan to seize control of Spherus Magna for himself. Part of his plan involved the killing of powerful Matoran universe inhabitants acting outside their parameters who might object to his rule. He also at some point may have tried to recruit the Element Lords as lieutenants, and he had hoped the Toa Nuva would have been his allies to prevent a Matoran rebellion. And finally, Velika's plan would have failed, resulting in the surviving Great Beings departing from Spherus Magna, while Agori and Matoran build a society of their own.
That's pretty funny.
So that is
Yeah, and
what we know.
again, like I hear that and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, am I glad to know that? I suppose. Sure wish it was written about. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, like I said, that was younger me. I know now. Greg's talked about it plenty of times. Even in your Eldred Johnson show, he talked
Mm-hmm.
about it. It was like why he opted to stop, and I get that. But everybody has their line. Eldred, what do you think about Greg's Q&A and the role it plays in the Bionicle community?
So, my interaction with it has been more or less the same as everyone else's from the last, I don't know, 19 or so years. Okay. Last 19 or so years, bar maybe the last 6. Maybe 9. So, something around there. And it's Greg was on BZ Power. He answers questions. There's information to learn. And it was kind of a cool thing because you could go and ask him a question to clarify something or pitch a suggestion. And then you would come back after having talked to him. You'd post on the topic, and it's like, look what I discovered, guys. Look what I found out. It was a cool thing because you could be like the one that bring this information forward. And it was always very cool, and of course, it's always very novel talking to your childhood author in such a way. And it was a really cool way to kind of collaborate. I think that the canonizations ultimately are fine. And I feel like right now, after BIONICLE has ended, there is a very interesting culture surrounding canon and specifically headcanon. Because we've had a lot of time to kind of just come to conclusions and assume that things are a certain way and come up with ideas for how things are. And Greg Canonizations, Greg Q&A, now kind of comes into conflict with that.
It's one of the most common points spoken when discussing the contests against them, or at least for why people might not be in favor of them. It's from that perspective. You know, the people already have a vision. Why mess with it?
But,
and I mean, in terms of like the contests, that's really the crux of it, right? Is it's people's preconceived it's the preconceived notions. And when Greg comes along and says something is a certain way, people are like, well, now it means I have to change the weapon that I gave to, say, Ord. And some people don't enjoy that.
And it's like, you know, there's only so much you can do. You know, like there's only so much, because it's the kind of thing where it's not everyone. Like, we can't paint with broad strokes and say, oh yeah, everyone that says this feels this way. Everyone that does this, you know, wants it this way.
There's levels to every side.
Yeah, but I do want to kind of start off by dispelling this notion, and I've been seeing this a lot recently, that, and I think actually Connor here in the Patreon chat kind of puts it well. I personally take anything Greg says post the Yesterday quest as semi-canon. Everyone is welcome to do that, but ultimately it isn't true. Like, you are welcome to interpret or apply or do or engage with anything that Greg says however you want. That is up to you. No one can decide that for you. It is also canon. Because Greg is the only current individual at LEGO who is a LEGO employee. Again, he's the editorial director for LEGO. They call it something different right now, though. I don't recall quite what it is. But, you know, it is his job to engage with the editorial side of themes. And he is the only one engaging with BIONICLE content. He was on the BIONICLE story team. He is the BIONICLE author. Like, he has unilateral meaning. Like, everything he does, and he said this on the message boards. He said that anything he does in regards to LEGO is as a representative of LEGO. So everything he's doing with these contests, he is representing LEGO. It's not just him just offhandedly in his free time being like, oh yeah, okay, let's do this. Like, it is on behalf of them.
Because I'm sure he needed to get LEGO sanctioned to even be on the boards in the first place.
He did.
You know?
He
That's
is
why
here.
we have our rules how they are about being, 13 years or
Correct.
above.
Yeah. So no, he is here on behalf of LEGO doing this and engaging for LEGO. The only time he has deviated from this is actually very recently, where he posted his own original non-BIONICLE story to the boards. It doesn't currently have a title yet, and it's got a prologue and the first chapter, but people are really engaged with that. It's really, really cool and exciting. But
it's pretty cool. I'm glad he's doing that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, if you care about what is and what is not canon, then you will care about what Greg says. Because, yes.
Well, it's because it's such a rabbit hole you could go down. If you question the role of Greg as being like the dude who decrees what is and what isn't, then you go down this rabbit hole of like, okay, it's a hop, skip, and a jump from everything post TYQ to everything not in like a published Lego material. You know, if it didn't come out in a book or a movie or comic or the website, could you count any of his answers as canon? Would that not just be Greg as a freelance agent, quote unquote, posting on BZP? What about the mini deaths of Toa 2 yet? Posted on BZP. What about stuff on the Lego message boards? What about stuff revealed in like BSO1 interview? I know at one point when he wasn't on BZP, they reached out to him and a bunch of story details were gleaned from that. Obviously, any question asked on TTVMB would be suspect by that. But like it's such a rabbit hole you could go down to where the entire foundational framework of like what the fandom is and how it perceives the Bionicle story would basically collapse. And I mean, if that's what people truly believe, that it you know, obviously, like I said, I don't know if it's majority or not. It merits like soul searching because it's always been such an intrinsic thing since word go. Greg is involved in this capacity. Greg answers questions. Fan interaction is highly integral. That's how it's been since 03. That's how we got stuff like the Dark Hunters book or the Rahi Beasts book, people submitting stuff. Fan participation. And that's where we get into stuff like Death of the Author and whether it's actually applicable or not.
Dang it, I gotta switch the image back. I realized I probably should have had a picture of Greg Farshty up here and not the Death of the Author image.
It's all right.
It's too late, so I'm gonna switch it back now. Just pretend it was Greg until now. There we go.
What is Death of the Author, Eljay?
Let me go ahead and bring up the TV Tropes page on this.
Handy.
Death of the Author is a concept from mid-20th century literary criticism named after Roland Barthes's groundbreaking 1967 essay on the subject. It holds that an author's intentions and background, including their politics and religion, should hold no special weight in determining how to interpret their work.
Yeah. This has many applications in literary analysis. People that really go into like the philosophies behind something, whether you should view the text solely as the text is, whether the author's intent in writing the text matters, if there's some meaning they want to convey, is that any more or less valid than any meaning that you take from it, you know, on an interpretive level. There's a lot of very heady stuff to do with the concept, and I don't want to belittle it by any means because I think it's a fascinating exploration into how to view literature. It doesn't really have a lot of bearing on Greg specifically, at least not in the way I think people think it does. To me, and this is just my interpretation, I don't want to say this is 100% fact, it's not. I don't view, because people say this is applicable a lot with authors like J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling will tweet something. This is actually something that happened in Harry Potter. Or this is a character that existed in Harry Potter. Or, you know, Dumbledore was actually gay the whole time in Harry Potter. Stuff added to the work after the fact. Greg does that too, but he also did that throughout the entirety of Bionicle's life, at least 7 years of it. And that is, I think, the difference when you're approaching this conversation. It's not like Greg wanted to write something, didn't write it, later on was like, this is what I actually meant the whole time, and this is law. Some instances, maybe. I've seen people say the weapons. is an example of that. Like, if he actually had those weapons in mind, he would have written them as such. He probably just made them up on the spot. It's totally possible. I have no way of knowing 100% whether he had those weapons in mind back when he wrote those stories many years ago, or whether he made them up on the spot. But how do you account for the hundreds of questions that he answered during Bionicle's life? Sometimes about current ongoing story, sometimes filling in the blanks through fan Q&A. I'll admit it's a very unique situation. You don't usually see authors with that degree of investment. And I think there's a conversation to be had about whether it was better or worse for the story as a whole. But you can't really deny with how intricately woven Greg was into the fandom's whole ethos that the Ask Greg topic was just as much a part of the story as the story serials or the encyclopedias. Though that was a place you checked to get new information concurrently while it was ongoing. It's baked into our DNA since 03, is basically my point. Most stories, authors write them, and then they disengage, and then they back away. And then you have the discussion about whether the work stands on its own merits, or whether you read into like the paratext of like who the author was, what their beliefs were, what they meant when they wrote it, the circumstances surrounding writing it, a bunch of stuff that isn't really applicable to our Lego story of robots fighting each other. But all that comes into the discussion for authors who just create a product and then put it out there to be consumed and interpreted. There isn't really a playbook on how to view a situation like Bionicle. It's a little bit of a different case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile such a thing existing in the very core of the franchise? Because nothing's really changed.
I mean, yeah, Bionicle has always been a very collaborative process. Basically, throughout the duration of its existence, it's always had a substantial degree of fan input and works in it. Like, most of the Dark Hunters are fan-made. Most of the Rahi that we know are fan-made. The ones with visuals, of course. We have a slew of different fan canon contests. Let me see if I can bring out like super fast. Here we go. Yeah, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from BZP. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from BSO1. 1, 2, 3, 4 from Kanohi Journal. 1, 2, 3 from the unofficial German Bionicle magazine, The Chronicler. We've had 3 from us thus far. And there were another 3 that went incomplete. So, and like these range for years. Bionicle has always been just a very uniquely collaborative process, at the very bare minimum since 2003. That's how it is. It's intrinsic.
For better or for worse.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's the best approach.
Yeah, whether or not you like that
is the approach.
Yeah, whether you like that or not is completely up to you. And you can decide to ignore what Greg says. But at that point, you're more or less going to be picking, like, a bunch out if you just do not want to have anything to do with what Greg is saying. Like, there is a lot that would be removed. And that is fine. That's your prerogative. It's up to the individual to choose how they engage with Bionicle and its story.
Yep. This is me like postulating, but like I kind of view it like this, right? If you engage with the deeper part of the fandom, like I've called it before, like the high affinity quote unquote part.
You ticked a lot of people off doing that.
I ticked off one person who said I was saying real fans versus fake fans, which isn't what that means. That's a term used to refer to levels of engagement. If you're one of the high affinity fans, it means you're plugged into like all the expanded material and you read the wiki and you're super engaged in fan content. if you're in those circles and you're in those spheres, you probably on some level at some point were down with Greg's level of involvement. Like you were cool with it. You're like, I subscribe to this. This is the interactions that I'm gonna have with this fandom. Having this, I don't want to say like a parasocial relationship because it doesn't really, that's not really the appropriate definition. But like Greg did engage a lot, not in the sense where he got to know anybody super well necessarily as like buddy buddy, but he was a fixture. He was a person in the community who you knew where to find him. He was a few button clicks away. Whether he replied to use another matter entirely, but any Bionicle fan at any point who had the internet has the freedom to ask the author of your story a message and ask them a question. That is unique. That was not a thing that commonplace ever. It really still is. Like that's a rarity. Anybody who is down to engage in that is probably part of these communities. And if you're not someone that cares, and if you're not someone who wants to hang on the word of everything the author says, and you value interpretations and extrapolations and headcanons and your own interpretation, I'm not one of those people, so I can't guess, but I would wager I probably just wouldn't engage to that heavy of a degree with the circles who do value that. Like it's a live and let live kind of situation, I would think. Like I'm not going to pay attention to or become invested in the Greg discourse. I'm just going to enjoy Bionicle on my own terms and let the people who do care about the Greg discourse do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think where it gets muddy is the fact that those people share community spaces. You know, like mask posting, TTV message boards, the 4chan communities, the Reddit communities, a few other places, Mask of Destiny nowadays, a bunch of assorted Discord servers, BZP and BSO1. Those are the Bionicle spaces, really. And there is no, segregated space, and I'm not even saying there should be, where people of differing investment levels can hang. And I think that's where the issues come from. If you're someone who likes Bionicle, you're going to be in one of those social spaces and you're going to see the mix of both people. I don't care about what Greg says versus, did you guys see this latest confirmation where he said that the spikes on Tuyet's broadsword point backwards? Like, those are the levels of investment. The fact that that is a minute detail that people care about, that's cataloged on a wiki with like a citation. And I, personally speaking, just in my experience and yours as well, we've always been in that community.
Mm-hmm. We've always been very heavily engaged, for better or for worse. But it's always something, and that's why I don't have any headcanons for Bionicle. And it's not because I don't like headcanons. It's just because for me, I've always been involved in tangible, written or stated or what have you story continuity. I've always been very heavily engaged in those conversations. What is definitively canon? And there is a definitive canon. This is a subject we've gone over before. I believe, let me see here real quick. It was episode 15. Is anything semi-canon in Bionicle?
Good episode.
Yeah. And so it's kind of stuff like that. Like, that's what I've always been engaged with. And if I were to have a bunch of like headcanons, then it doesn't, like, it muddies the waters for me and my clarity on what I understand and what I know is canon. Okay, I take that back. I do have one.
What is it, Eljay? Because I have one too.
You have one too? Okay, I don't know yours. Mm-hmm. Mine is what Liwa sounds like. That's my one headcanon.
That's because you're egotistical.
Listen, I made a whole video. I made a whole video talking about this. So I'm not alone. There are dozens of us, Meso. Dozens. My headcanon is a lover's cannon. Okay, get out. Goodbye.
I'm not joking. That's like
Oh my goodness.
that's a point where the conversation pivots. Because it's like that's the one time I feel in my life where I've been on the other side of the coin.
But okay, so here's the thing. Love is canon, Meso. Love is canon. But romance in the Matorn universe is not.
Well, yeah, I know that.
That's it.
But that's my point, right? That it's the MU bit. That's where the discussions always go.
Oh, I see.
I don't think it's a big deal. I've long since made my peace with it. Don't mistake me for going like, yeah, this terrible decision. It sucks. But like, that's the one time where I've been on the other side of the coin. It's like in the Bionicle story, in the movie I watched when I was 6 years old, characters flirted. In the movie I watched when I was 7 years old, characters flirted.
You didn't
and
see
Mattel wanted to go on a romantic ride drive.
No,
in the
happen.
Bo-Rock animations that I never watched until I was like a teenager because I'm a loser who didn't have internet access back when they were relevant. There was clear flirting and blushing.
Nope.
And then all of a sudden,
there was not blushing, Meso. They literally don't have flesh to blush.
There was blushing.
No, there
Do
was
you
not.
forget? Do you forget the blush?
I thought you were talking. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the movie. Still, sorry.
No, I'm talking about the Bo-Rock animations.
Yeah, I got you now.
And all that stuff, I'm like, that existed, that happened, and then Greg Varsity comes along and is like, that did not happen. That is not true. Lies.
I mean, but yeah, like we all know why though, right?
I know why.
And it's been discussed and it's been disseminated and it's been hashed out. It's like it is authorial intent, but also all that stuff was added by people that don't have authorial command on Bionicle. Right?
Yeah.
You know, like they may have then. That's not what I'm arguing. But they do not now.
Yeah.
That's my whole thing. It's like,
I mean, that's a fact. Like that is what it is. Like I said, if we accept the stuff that Greg says as canon, which if you care about the canon at all in the year 2022, you have to, or else you second guess everything. If you second guessed anything, like that would be on the chopping block too. Can you really trust what he says in that aspect when it's contradicted by official material? And that's one of the only instances where I do feel like the discussion about authorial intent versus death of the author is actually relevant, because the only way the conversation makes any sense and the only way you get the full context is if you look into, well, who made the decision to put love in? Was it actually a decree by the story team, or was it, ancillary studios working on supplemental projects, or things slipped in the movie just as like a wink and a nod to real people for relatability's sake? And of course we know it's the latter. Lego didn't have some mandate that was like, put this stuff in to signify the budding relationship between Huki and Maku. The Templar Studios people just thought it was cute, and so they put it in.
And that's fine.
We know that, but we only know that because of the paratext is the word, like the meta narrative around it.
Of course,
the
but
intent.
That's just we're heavily engaged and we're high affinity.
There you go. Yeah. If I was just a regular user, and I mean I've said it in the past, I think that the disconnect between like official media and then what Greg says, I think that's a con. I think it's a con for continuity, but I also think it's just like a flaw in terms of how everything relates to one another. It makes for a weird, disconnected situation, all to achieve the end goal of Greg just didn't want to write romance, and he didn't have to because he chose what to write or what not to write. So I think it's kind of silly, but I also have to accept it as true, because it's just what it is. But if you are one of the people who thinks when the text comes out, the author's beliefs or viewpoints or retroactive continuity or clarifications or no, this was what I really meant that should all be discarded. It should be killed, which is what the term means. I can then understand why you would be like, okay, love is canon. I saw it with my own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, the meme is not love is canon. The meme is there is no canon.
Yeah.
Because if you go down that rabbit hole, you can't pick and choose. If you take a brick out, the whole thing tumbles.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're talking about today, because even Sharnak in the YouTube chat was like, remember that Bionicle is also about creativity. It has its own canon, but is also intended to be a canvas to create your own stories. And that's true. That can be done very easily and very well. And no one is trying to take that away from anyone. Because people can still create their own stories with canon characters all they want. Like, no one's gonna stop them. It's not a thing that you need to abide by. You can make Liwa have, like, 5 arms. No one's gonna stop you, and no one's gonna... Like, you're not gonna get in trouble with the canon police. You know? Make your own stories. Make your own canon. Make your own adventures. That is fine. The world is there for you to do that. The way that we're engaging with it right now is talking about, like, strict canon. It's just... We're talking about what is and isn't canon. That's what the contests do is they decide, you know, canonical appearances for these characters, some of which would have appeared
even before the canon contest. Like, that's, of course, that in the modern era is the spectrum by which we engage in this conversation the most. It's framed in the lens of, like, the canon contests. Even before that, even when we were just kids, like, was how we interacted with the fandom. We'd go on BZP, we'd look in the Ask Greg topic, we'd flip through, you know, we'd have hour-long debates about the Red Star and whether that was a good idea or not. But at no point were we like, the Red Star, I choose to reject that is how Greg describes it. Because so much of our experience with Bionicle is rooted in consuming the written Greg sanctioned material. I can't decouple it. I can't untangle those wires. For better or for worse, it's all wrapped up in the core of what Bionicle is, and it has been since 2003. So I have to accept it, whether I like all of it or not. And personally, even though there are some issues, I still like the vast majority of it. I like the role that Greg has played. I think it's like he didn't have to stick around. He didn't have to interact with the community on that degree. He could have ignored us. He could have coasted us by, you know, from 2003 onwards, just done his job, cashed a paycheck, and then bail. But by being so invested, that was his way of, like, saying, you guys are cool. I like that you care about this product so much. I want to bolster that experience wherever I can.
There's a quote.
And I respect that.
There's a quote from Greg. It's from the LEGO message boards. It's posted on September 29th, 2014. And Greg says this: just wanted to say a quick something. A lot of you guys are Bionicle fans, many from way back. It's no secret that you are some of the smartest, most loyal, and most dedicated fans out there. You, and you alone, have carried the torch for the line over the last 4 years. Hopefully you will feel rewarded for your efforts by 2015 Bionicle. Regardless,
Oof.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say that I am really proud to be associated with you, and you should be really proud of yourselves. Anyway, Greg, hey, never canonize anything again. It's like that.
Yeah,
I
mean,
like that is how he looks at it. And I kind of feel like, well,
how
you know,
pure.
It's and like right now, there are people getting upset and they're getting angry. And I know it's because to some degree they're also very passionate, you know? They're passionate about Bionicle too. But there's a lot of gosh, not objectivity. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. It's just people aren't realizing what this is, what we're doing, what the situation is. It's like they're not like spatially aware that, you know, we're all passionate about it, but it is still, it's ultimately, it's a story of fiction that was derived from a toy line.
Yeah. More or less. I think the issues with the weapons thing, it comes from two places, like we said at the start. It's the place of Greg answering questions in such detail is bad. I wish Bionicle story would just be left alone, which is one point of discussion. And then the separate point is, you know, why did TTV seek out further restrictions when they're just about to do a contest for it anyway?
But that
And that's the group of people that they'll accept the results of the contest because they view Greg's authority in that capacity to say it. They just don't want the restrictions imposed by Greg mandating it beforehand and would have preferred weapons dictated after the fact. And you know what? I agree. If I had had my, you know, authority way, we would have just decided the weapons in the contest and then Greg would have canonized them. That's why we didn't ask which weapons they had. Personally, subjectively, I just forgot that they had weapons at all, and we were trying to decide whether or not to mandate them. At the same time, even though that is my preference, I don't feel like any damage has been done. It's not difficult to tweak the weapons that Amok has to suit the new parameters. And because we're not imposing build restrictions on the Toa, because why would we? There's an endless breadth of ways for you to fuel the creative engine for these guys still.
Yeah. I mean, I want to take kind of a trip down memory lane in terms of the previous canon contests we've hosted. Like, let's take a look at all the ones that have been canonized less. So let's look at Helrix right here. The description for Helrix was a frail Toa of water with a mace and a shield. And an unknown mask. Look at everything that the creators got input on. They created the very first Toa of water. You know, this looks like a Toa from way back in 2001. This looks like something you would see line up very well with the Toa Mata. You know, it looks very thematically fitting and very age appropriate. And the people that made it also got to decide the design of the shield and the mace and an entirely new mask. Like, that's a lot of creative input that they get to point to and be like, yeah, I had a hand in that. And everyone that voted for it gets to say, yeah, I had a hand in that. You know, there was participation, there was a collaboration. Let's look at our Taka. Giant 10-foot tall gray-green with a hammer and a mask. Oh my goodness, the mask description. I gotta look this up real quick because it always gets me. It always gets me how the folks, Perpetual, who designed the mask, knew the assignment. This guy knocked it out of the park. This is the description for the Mask of Creation from Generation 1. His mask was the most ornate anyone had ever seen. More than just a Kanohi, it was a true work of art. The metallic protodermis from which it was forged was arranged in intricate patterns and designs, each reflecting one of the many cultures that flourished in the universe. The eye slits were angular and pointed, giving him an air of both wisdom and a vague sense of menace. Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And Connor, who designed the original model, this guy is tall, he is imposing, the color scheme is spot on, and again, they can both look at this and be like, I had a part in that. Anyone that voted for this can look at this and be like, I had a part in that. Like, that's an incredible creative process. The Toahaga. Oh my gosh, the Toahaga. easily the results that everyone, like the most amount of people, have been the most happy with. Like they look fantastic. Like there was such an incredible collaborative process for the Haga, and everyone chipped in. Real quick to address this comment here by Trav Dump. You forgot that she's dark blue. Whoops. No, we didn't. Whoops. If you look at the quote, then you'll see that dark blue is very, very vague, honestly, because dark blue to light blue in 2001 is Mata blue. Whoops. So, I'm sorry, but this has been discussed. But all of these things, like there's been such a collaborative community process in these items, you know, and there's been so much personality and personal touch on all of these things, even within that framework. You know, they all had weapons confirmed. That didn't stop anyone from having a hand in making something unique.
It's about levels. I'm sure that would be the response given. And I'm sure that that is the discussion. It's like, yes, people are still able to be creative, but people would technically be able to be more creative if the weapons weren't mandated. That's really the crux of it.
Yeah.
And on a basic technical factual spreadsheet, level, yes, that is true. That's why we didn't seek it out. But ultimately, letting the chips fall where they may, letting the results speak for themselves, I don't think the contests will be any worse for it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not the end of the world to change a weapon for a mock. Can a weapon be tied into the visual identity of a mock? Yes, I've seen plenty of people who are like, they had twin guns for some of the Toa. They had swords or spears or glaives or axes or maces. And there are points. I mean, Stronius is a good example, for instance, in Bionicle. His club was very tied into like his spiky aesthetic. If Greg had been like, no, Stronius has like a lance, hypothetical, it wouldn't quite have hit the same as the club.
No,
but
yeah.
these are in such a formative stage. We know so little about them elsewise, and we don't seek to find out anything more about them. I think that ultimately there will still be excellent creative potential to come from these.
Yeah.
I do not think no severe damage has been done to the quality or caliber of mocks that we will see from the contest, and that's essentially my point.
Yeah.
And as I've said elsewhere, and I'll say it here as well, based on the reaction to this from a vocal majority, minority, subset, I don't know, we will not be asking Greg anything else because I do not feel quite plainly comfortable with doing so because I do not wish to get flayed alive. A common point I proposed was like, at any point during the years, and if I had not asked this, anyone could have asked the same question and the public asked Greg for him and received the same answer.
Yeah. And like the response to that has been, well, then people would be angry at them, but that's not a good answer. You shouldn't be angry at anyone, really. Like, I understand maybe being frustrated because you had an idea you were really passionate about, but like that anger is very unwarranted. And we actually had this discussion on the boards in terms of, or at least I did. I had this discussion on the boards in terms of like how much more likely we are to receive an answer from Greg than other people are. And looking at the data, we aren't. We are not more likely to receive an answer than anybody else is, even though we have a direct contact to him. It just it is not true. So, yeah. It's really just, it's all about how you engage. and what you value. If you want to ignore the canon contest, which many people have not, both result in excellent creativity. Like, do what you want.
Yeah.
Like, canon has never stopped creativity, and in a lot of ways, it's bolstered it.
Yeah. I think the problem it only comes in when the people of the two clashing ideologies share social spaces. That's when you start to get like conflict and disagreements. But I don't think either side is harmed. The creative the potential people have for the Bionicle franchise and characters in the world has always been totally fine in lieu of all the hyper specific canon detail hunting subset of the fan base. If people want to make a blue Tahu or like Tahu Toa of Ice tomorrow and post it up, if it's like a great designed mock, people would go nuts over it. Be like, this is great. And it would get like acclaim on social media. And if they wanted to write a fanfic, the AU where Tahu is a Toa of Ice, and people read it and said this was cool, if it was good writing, if it stood up to scrutiny, it would get a fan base. None of that is squashed. But people do have to, they have to coexist with the people who, the way they enjoy Bionicle is the details. And I think people might, again, this is the separate group of people from the ones who give us flack. I do think people might care about the details a little too much. Maybe even ourselves included at times. But again, it's so baked into the core at this point. It's difficult to separate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I'm curious to get people's feedback on. Like, we're going to keep talking, but like, I lend the floor to you guys. What do you make of this tangled puzzle? Do you guys prefer one style over the other? Fewer restrictions, more restrictions, because restrictions mean details, more information versus less. What do you guys think about Greg's involvement? Not even just in terms of the contests, but in general. If you have any thoughts, feel free to say them, or if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and we can address those.
Yeah.
Because I've said a lot, but I don't really know 100% how I feel. Obviously, I lean more towards the detail-oriented side, but I can see the merits of both.
I know exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
I like solid canon, even if I don't agree with it all the time, and there are plenty of things that I don't agree with, and that I have perspectives on as someone who has written things in the past, that has consumed other media. But it is a canon. It is a story, and I'm engaging with it. Someone brought up an interesting point on the message boards that these 3 characters that we're going to do contests for the Yesterday quest, Greg developed them entirely on his own. They're his characters. Like, they weren't going to be sets.
Yeah, it's also a funny little wrinkle, isn't it?
Like, they are entirely his. We're just adapting his design, like his characters. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, because at first I was like, but then I realized, no, that's right. That's right. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the reaction to all this might just be like shrug. Like, even Toa of Plastic in the chat, she's like, it is what it is. Shrug. And I'm like, yeah, that's a totally fair response. What were you saying, Elj?
Oh, no. That's about it.
Yeah. The thing I want to figure out, and it's why I want this to be like less about what we think and more if anybody does have any thoughts to share. No one's really asking anything so far. Oh, wait, no, there we go. There's a question. But I want to get community feedback on this, because I think our audience personally probably leans more towards liking the hyper detailed aspects.
I think.
But the Bionicle community is wide and diverse.
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't. I think at one point, especially like I said, during Bionicle, I think people were riding high. It was like, oh, the author's interacting with us. Cool. We should ask everything. That was back when like Planet Person was doing the Ask Greg, topics, the compendium on BZP's blogs. There were contests every which way and every left, right, and center. Kanohi Journal, BSO1, BZP, short stories contests, Dark Hunter books, Rahi books. I think it was very popular back then, but I don't know since then. Obviously, people still like it in some capacity because the majority of people want the contests to continue. That much we know. But there is a difference between letting the contests speak for themselves and Greg still adding new details through Q&A. I don't know where people land on that one. I can tell you that the vitriol has definitely leaned me away from pursuing it further, which is why we're not going to be asking any more clarifying questions unless like there's just no other way. And people, in the community are like, yeah, you have to, this has to be decided for the sake of the contests. But like, maybe it is time that the era ends. I don't know. That's not a conclusion that will be reached today. But it might be a topic in the future. Maybe a survey or something.
No.
You don't think so? You think it'll be riding high?
I think that Greg should remain involved because I think canon is important. And I think that his involvement is important. Even in this respect. Like, we are still involved and so is he. But, he is still the...
I agree it's important.
He's still the... As long as he's working at LEGO and LEGO is sanctioning him to do things and he's engaging with Bionicle, as he has, I think that he should remain in that capacity. Because that means, like, Bionicle is still seeing addition through those means.
I can see a point being raised, though, that's like, well, let the contests do that.
And they
but
did.
We don't want Greg to reveal any new details about the story or characters in like Q&A.
Then stop asking him.
Keep him to the contests.
Then don't ask him. And encourage other people not to ask him. That's fine, but I don't think that it's up to us to decide what Greg does.
I agree.
So
he's just curious. I'm just curious to get people.
I think that is very egotistic, in my opinion.
I agree and I don't. I think Greg does care what people think. And I think that the will of what people think does shape his decision-making process. It played into why he stopped doing the serials, as he discussed, and it also, with the contest, he straight up was like, yeah, I'll do it if people are down for it. And the majority of people is down for it, so they're continuing. But would that still be like, if people were like, we don't want there to be any more Q&A, would he be like, fair enough? I think he probably would, because that does matter in some capacity to him.
Mm-hmm.
We have some questions, so we can answer them from GU. What do you think of Bionicle G1 not being properly finished as a complete story and its impact on Bionicle's continuity? I'm guessing it's in reference to only Q&A being the way to add new details.
So, I used to... well, actually, Meso, do you want to go first?
No, you can go first.
Okay. I used to be very frustrated and of the opinion that Bionicle's story had not concluded. Because the story serials were still out there, they were still a thing, they were not finished. And so for the longest time I was like, well, Bionicle hasn't ended yet. And then something Greg said, it's like, it kind of recontextualized it, because he's like, well, to me, Bionicle wouldn't end. If it was up to me, it would just keep going. It'd be a continuous stream of adventures of... endless possibilities. It would be this ongoing journey. And it kind of made me think, well, yeah, what would be a Bionicle end, Like, the world still exists, it still, like, changes and transforms. Bionicle ended with the final comic and the final novel. Makuta was defeated. The whole point of the Bionicle story was to battle Makuta. And they did it. They won. They reconnected Spherus Magna. The Bionicle story concluded with Tahu on that beach with the Mask of Life saying, all right, we're going to go do our own thing now. Let's go. That was the end of Bionicle. Bionicle Generation 1 concluded, and the world continued going. And we got to kind of get a glimpse of that continuation of that world.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. So, I pretty much agree.
Yeah, and it's like, so yeah, to me, I'm fine.
I think that's a good interpretation. If you're asking me, like, what I would have, like, preferred, like, what do I think about it not being properly finished, I agree with Eljay. Like, it did receive an ending. The plot received an ending. The issue is it continued, and I think the ending works fine as a conclusion. If I had it my way, which I don't, life doesn't work that way, I would axe the serials. I wish we hadn't been teased with the potential of it continuing, only for it to not be. I've gone on record many times, been like, it felt hella manipulative, even though I know it obviously was not. Again, in my youth, I was like, oh, Lego just tried to appease the angry fan base by saying it would continue, and then they probably told Greg to stop writing it and put him on so many projects that he couldn't devote time to it, and all my conspiracy theorizing wasn't actually the case. Greg stopped doing it for his own reasons, and yeah, I'm sure his schedule played a big part into that. So it is what it is. I've long since accepted it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is what it is. Says from the AGL group, I think at this point, over a decade since this continuity had a 10,000% unambiguously core canon installment, gratuitous canonization is more harmful than helpful. I get that approach. I think the discussion is had from where you draw the line between, like, what's gratuitous and what's not.
Yeah, it's like, what is gratuitous to you? It's not going to be the same to somebody else.
Yeah, everyone has their own levels, like we discussed at the start. My level is the elements of the Toa manga. I think that doesn't enhance any bit of Bionicle. No bit. It's not interesting. It's not worth knowing. Doesn't make me care about the Toa of Ice as characters. I just know they exist, and it's a funny little bit of trivia that I point to at points, and I laugh. For some people, their level is appearances of characters. They're like, I don't want to know how these guys look. I don't view that as a problem. I think that enhances my experience, because if I go back and reread the stories, now I have a visual in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has their preferences. If Greg tomorrow answered the question, it was like, Tahu, on the first day after they beat Makuta, Tahu explored Spherus Magna, and he needed to eat, and so he found a bowl of Thornax stew, and he put his hands to it, and he absorbed energy from it, and he thought the energy had a bad flavor, and so he put it down, and he never went to, absorb Thornax stew again, and that was a thing that happened, so Tahu hates Thornax stew, confirmed. I would probably think that tips into gratuitous.
Yeah.
That's just silly.
Or like right now, Tahu has only a handful of confirmed Krata powers from when he used the golden armor. Like a very handful. We know about heat vision. We know about quick healing. I think that's it. Let me double check real fast.
I know we don't have them all, that's for sure.
Yeah, heat vision and quick healing are the only ones that we know of. But he's also been described as the most powerful Toa, bar no one. So he clearly has more. I don't think we should know what all those are. He doesn't have all 42, but he definitely has a lot. We shouldn't know. Because now you can give him friggin' whatever power you want. That's fine.
Yep.
You know?
I agree. And I'm sure people could look and that they would hear us right now, and some of our critics would be like, that's hypocritical. Why do you guys hate that and not the contest stuff? And I'm just like, that's just our personal line. Everyone has a line they draw. That's just ours. It doesn't mean it's law.
Yeah.
I don't think Ord having a mace is destructive to my experience of Bionicle, or I don't think it's silly, superfluous information.
Yeah.
I think that's like relevant to his identity as a character in the sparse bit of time we got to know him.
Yeah.
And
also,
Tahu hating Thordax Stew would do nothing.
And also, visualizations are in a very different realm than other things. Like the whole Toamangai thing and their weapons and masks being confirmed. Like, we're never gonna see them. You know? They're never gonna be given visual structure. They were also never characters. Like, they are purely, honestly, blank slates. Like, the characters that these canon contests are for appeared. They had lines. You know? They had intended appearances somewhere along the line.
Yep. I want the names of the 3 Toa of Ice to be Frieza, Cooler, and like Chill something.
Stop.
DBZ references. It'd be great. There's the trio of Cold. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Cord asks, you
Go ahead.
mentioned that it was hard for you to disentangle Greg answers from the rest of the franchise, but those are just message board posts, while the rest of the franchise is actual published material. Thoughts?
For me, I engage with all of it at once.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, to me, there isn't a separation because it is being published. You can't see me, I got air quotes. It is being published by the author. Like, it is being put out there into the public by him. So to me, it's all one and the same.
Yeah.
It's on behalf of
He goes
Lego.
on to say that the Greg answers are incredibly superfluous to the actual story portrayed in books, movies, etc. If you don't know about them, you lose nothing not knowing them.
That's fine.
You maybe could follow along, but over the 19 years of Greg answering questions, I would not say that all of them are superfluous. We've learned very significant things in that time.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a good or a bad thing, irrelevant to the conversation. Sometimes I do think it's hurtful, sometimes not. We've learned very significant things. For me, my distinction, not only I agree, I paid attention to it, but I would say it's also the fact that it was going on while the story was, like I already said. That's the difference. It became such an intrinsic part of the community. It's something I don't really think many people, not to sound like an old timer, because I know it makes me sound like one, but like if you weren't part of BZP back in the heyday when it was popping off, you may have a different interpretation. Because there is some distance between Greg, at least there was for a time, and the Bionicle community when he wasn't around, when he was on the Lego message boards, etc., etc. There was a time when that was what you did on BZP. Every day, the routine, you check the Greg topic. Ooh, I wonder what Greg answered today. Or, oh, I have a cool idea for something I'm going to ask Greg. I'll PM it to him, and then I'll share it in the topic, and maybe I'll get my name cited in the weekly, Planet Person Roundup, where he's like all the compendium of answers, and maybe I'll get on the wiki, and then I can do like a theory about it. Like that was very core to the fandom DNA. Even though you're right, a lot of it is anecdotal and a lot of it is superfluous. I agree. And there is a distinction between it and published material. It's all part of what interacting with like the Bionicle machine was like. And still is. Like, it is slowed down, but the principle is the same. You know.
Yeah.
Anything catch your eye, Elge? Because I'm just going down the list.
And there's some things earlier that irritated me, but I wouldn't necessarily anything
I
catching
saw.
my eye.
Fair enough.
It's like, listen, if this all becomes, this is actually a really good example of authorial intent. So earlier, Trav Dump in the YouTube comments was like, "You forgot that she's dark blue. Whoops!" in all caps, referring to Helrix. And I responded, yes, very condescendingly, because we have had a slew of people try very desperately to use that as a gotcha, that we missed something, and so we've erroneously made Helrix the wrong color. And we're quite thoroughly exhausted with these like these gotchas and these attempts at finding like loopholes and ways that we've screwed up. And so Zine YT in the comments said, "LJ, that was a little condescending to Trav Dump. I understand you wanted to correct him, but that was a little hurtful." It's like, yeah, because we've been dealing with that for years. And we've been trying so desperately to be like, hey, listen, you know, we're doing our best here. But also that's not something we missed. We didn't screw that up. And it's exhausting. And this tolerance of that hasn't gotten us anywhere.
I can't prescribe even the intent of the message. You maybe didn't mean it like that.
See,
but
that's the thing. Because then I was like, and it wasn't hurtful when he attempted a gotcha. And Trav Dumb was like, it's less a gotcha and more oops, because the idea of dark blue Helrix is bad. Which I have no idea what that means. But fair enough. Wasn't a gotcha. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah,
it's
a difficult.
But then Zane DT was like, yes, it was hurtful. He was trying to be insulting. That doesn't mean you stoop to their level. That puts you as an individual and representative of TTV in a bad light. It's not about respect. It's about dignity.
Maggots 2 Electric Boogaloo moment.
But first of all, and this is really exemplary of the subject matter, because someone else is interpreting how that person intended the message and how they feel from the message.
Pretty interesting.
It's like, isn't that interesting? Anyway,
it is some funny parallels,
isn't it? For what's worth, Zane, I'm sorry you were offended at that. Trav, I'm sorry you were. If you didn't mean that, if you did, the intent remains. If not, hey, miscommunication, misunderstanding.
Yeah,
but
it's a difficult thing to discuss because it's been a long-running situation. Trying to encompass every potential loophole, every potential scrap of text. That was what prompted us to do like the 4,000s of posts long Toa discussion topics that we had to deal with for months on end that delayed the Haga into oblivion. And all that got us in the end was people saying we didn't listen to community feedback. So,
which is like,
c'est la vie. It's pretty funny.
We're trying. We're trying. We've been doing what we can. It's not. There are a lot of people who look at this and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe." Like they armchair contest run, and it's like, okay. And like the people that were saying, well, TTV should have been more careful when they asked about the weapons. How much more careful could we have gotten than did they have weapons?
To be fair, they may have been referencing the Tuyet sword with that one.
No, it was not in reference to the Tuyet sword.
Because I could see that argument with the Tuyet sword.
And the Tuyet sword, yes, fair enough.
Request.
And like we can send a follow-up and be like, hey, just to clarify, like that's an option.
I don't want to.
we don't want to though, because it's like it's pretty obvious.
No more follow-up.
But
no more.
Yeah.
This is less of a, well, it is a question, but it's also just a line of thinking. He goes on for a few messages. I'm going to read this because it is a prominent, anti-canon edition perspective from the AGL group. If the fans have kept Bionicle afloat, is it right for those fans to have their decade plus of interpretations be discounted? And like Star Wars, there's absolutely tiers of canon. Some core material is definitely more relevant to the public and brand than others. So acting like it's impossible to decouple certain types of canonization is a bit hyperbolic. Also, canonization contests can absolutely be seen as harming community creativity instead of bolstering it. Mock contests are not meritocracies, and there's a definite barrier to entry for influence. I don't think late stage canonization is always bad, and I don't have any issues with the contests impacting mental images. But this is a discussion to be had, and I agree. I think it is worth having. It's definitely been a recurring thing from word go. My apologies. They say it's she, her. I apologize. So her posts are very interesting because they highlight, what's the word? How to phrase it? They highlight the perspective of, do the contests invalidate creativity? Do they invalidate the headcanons? Do they invalidate the mocks? We've discussed this before. It's very clear at this point that you're either on one side of the coin or you're not. I am not a mockist. I am not a community mockist. I did not have headcanons about these characters. I did not make mocks of these characters. So I would never claim to fully, put myself in the shoes of those people. Obviously, some people do feel that way. I just don't see, from an outsider looking in, I still do not see how knowing the facts about what a character actually looks like devalues or discredits personal interpretations. Because if you are the kind of person to take value and to take satisfaction and personal merit in creating designs for these characters that work within your interpretation of Bionicle, and you did so knowing the state of Bionicle after that serial was made, knowing that Greg was the one pretty much only conducting the story through Q&A, that he wasn't going to go back and write it. If you were content in that, I wouldn't think it would affect you one way or the other whether Greg then inevitably later on is like, this is how the character actually looks like. This is a canon design. If you don't place arbitrary value on Greg's significance, if you had designs in place, would they be affected just because Greg later on says that? Or would they still be just as valid as they always were because your ability to interpret the story and add to it coexists with the official material because those designs did not show up in the official material? I don't know. Maybe that's just me and you, Eljay, because I know you agree. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's just our perspective because we are not creative mockists and artists in that way. Clearly, some people do feel like it's a negative thing to get visuals. I don't see that it is intrinsically. I don't view it as disrespecting the fans to continue getting visuals for characters. If Bionicle had continued and we had kept getting sets, who's to say we wouldn't have gotten those characters someday anyway? I don't know. It's a weird conversation for me to even engage in. But I can understand generally where you're coming from. I just can't relate to it. And as for your Star Wars example, that is a good one. You mentioned core material that's definitely more relevant to the public and brand than others. I agree. I would not say, just because my experience was engaging with it in one, conglomerate. I would never say that Greg answering a question on BZP about a color has as much value as Mask of Light. I don't agree. At the same time, if you care about the story, if you care about the canon, there may be elements in Mask of Light that matter less than what Greg says. Case in point, the Holly and Jala flirting. That's just one of those weird instances. It's not about what's popular and what's not. That's a conversation to be had that's kind of separate from this one. It's about what's recognized as canon and what's not. In Star Wars, like you had the Star Wars Legends, the expanded universe that Disney just straight up and yeeted when they made the sequel trilogy. Just decades of work just thrown into the stratosphere, basically. That's an example to me of work being disrespected. Because that was the work of people for decades that was not treated as fan work. That was treated as, because there was no other contradictory source to say otherwise. That was Star Wars. All those stories were Star Wars, and then suddenly Disney bought it and they were like, this is not Star Wars anymore. Any and all fan works existed in a state of non-canon, and they did that by design because they were just fan works. So I don't know. That's all I got for that one.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
How you doing, Elj?
No,
Are you ready to
I'm
wrap
fine.
up soon,
I'm just reading stuff. That's all.
Lots of good posts. Let's see what else we got. Trevor Samora. The story itself is like a Lego set. You can take elements from it and mix and add and change and deconstruct it all you want, or you can keep all the sets intact, different for everybody. I generally agree.
Yeah.
I gave my Zane Evo mech from Ninjago, I gave him Isator's sword from the Protector of Ice. I just think the sword looks better than being a tiny blue knife, because it's actually in proportion with the mech. I just think it looks cool. And that's just how I have it built. I'm never going to go back to the blue sword. I've already forgotten how it looks in my mind unless I deliberately look up a picture of it. I just built it that way. But that doesn't change the fact that if I look up a picture of that box art, or I look up those instructions, the mech is built with the tiny blue sword.
Yeah.
Both exactly coexist.
Pretty much. Yeah. Are we in full-on Q&A session, Meso, about anything, or is it just about the topic?
We can answer off-topic things. We're about to head into wrap-up mode, so if there's anything people have, just fire it away.
Diego Diaz in the YouTube chat asks, would you consider contests for non-shape-shifted or non-mutated versions of characters like Miserix or the Baraki? We have actually considered contests for the Baraki's non-mutated forms, especially since several of them appear in active story. But they are not a part of the second list of characters. And we actually haven't even released the second list of characters because there's just still so much in flux pertaining to the contests. We don't want to
jump the gun.
Exactly. So, as far as that's concerned,
I would consider it.
We have considered it.
We're aware that those exist as potential options. They've just been to us, those are the lowest of the low priorities.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, I'm a little hesitant of doing anything that has already been created by a fan. Does that make sense? It does. Dark Hunter, or Makuta. I'm not super comfortable with that. Because everything we have right now is all like it's a Lego thing. Even on the second list, we have done pre-mutation contests. We are going to do pre-mutation contests though, or at least one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's Nadiki. So there's that, but yeah, I mean, considered not really anything that we're looking into, and probably aren't going to look into for a very long time, if ever. Put it that way.
Yeah. Diego Diaz also asked, "Are you planning to post any preliminary rules for the 2 Yet contest? It would be nice to have to know if there's something we need to modify in our mocks."
That is something. There's something we are actually discussing on the boards right now. We are gonna post if it's gonna be posted, it'll be posted on the boards ahead of time.
Yeah,
honestly, and then
we're not ready just yet. That will hopefully be coming soonish.
Yeah. Right now, what we can tell you is that the current restrictions are it has to be a blue toe of water that looks like a toe of water that has a barbed broadsword and the barbs point toward the hilt. Those are the only restrictions. That's it right now. Unless something comes out of left field that we just don't know about right now, at which point, hey, you can help us out by making us aware of it. That's going to be it. It's really simple. In the art portion, we're mandating the Nui Stone because it's such an integral part of Tuyet's character.
Yeah.
So, there's a little bit of in-chat backlash for the idea of the Baraki pre-mutation contest. Petrus specifically says, setting standards for the Baraki retroactively sets standards for 6 entire species. We already have enough species in the MU having their appearances dictated by a single or 2 individuals. I hate to break it to you, but that's what Lariska's gonna do. So, if you don't want to know what Lariska's species looks like, you are about to.
Oof. That is pretty funny, though. He's not wrong. I can imagine the page on the wiki being like, Takadax's species
that's
vaguely resembles.
It's already a thing. There's already a page called Sapient Species on BSO1. And it's just Sapient Species / unnamed species. And it just lists all the different ones, like Pridax and Mantaxes. And that's it. They're all just compiled on one page. And honestly, all that would do would be... like, all the images would go to do would be to add 6 pictures to that page and give us a template for those species, and then add them to the Baraki pages, one of which would be hidden, because Karapar didn't die that way. He died mutated.
Oh my god.
So, again,
yeah,
not anything, like, if that's a worry of yours, if you're worried about us trying to investigate Baraki pre-mutation contests, don't. We're not looking into it right now.
That's not an interest of mine. Yeah. The only way that would ever be an interest is if we do literally everything else and people are like, yeah, we want more contests.
Yeah,
and the overwhelming majority.
We're like decrepit husks going,
what else is left? Listen,
yeah.
I would sooner, and this is not a joke. It is a joke. It is a joke, but it's not a joke. Also, I'm dead serious. I would rather do a Botar's replacement contest than a pre-mutated Baraki contest.
Botar's replacement contest. It's not happening.
Get it trending. Get it trending.
No.
Hashtag Botar's replacement contest.
Stop
it. Okay.
So we do want to talk about what characters are on the second list. It's a very exciting list. Like, gosh dang, it's a really cool list of characters. And they're
somewhat cool list. I think you're more excited about it than I
am. I'm excited about the potential because there are a lot of really cool creative things that people could do with the characters on the list.
Yeah, that's true.
But we're not releasing it yet. We don't want to discuss it, which characters are on it. Because, again, we don't know what characters. We don't know the direction of the contests right now. We're still kind of hashing that out and seeing how the next one's going to go and maybe the one after that. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Because, like, if the contest just ceased to be, then, like, we're done. The list has no more purpose.
Mm-hmm. I think we maybe should to wind down on that point. We've crossed. We're just about to cross the 2-hour mark, and that's kind of where I wanted to leave this at.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting a lot of questions or comments about the things. I think people are tapped out in that regard.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good discussions, a lot of good points raised. Whether we agree or disagree, I all think it's worth considering. Here's what I will say, just like full stop. I've already said it, but just to reiterate while we close, based on the reaction, whether it's minority, majority, I don't know. I don't really care at this point. We don't plan to ask Greg anything else. We're not seeking restrictions. We don't want any more rules necessarily. I like how open the rest of the contests are. So we do not deign to ask for any more clarifications unless deemed absolutely necessary. And at any point that is deemed, it'll be discussed, on the boards and elsewhere. First, people will weigh in. We're not going to ask Greg anything more. What I want you guys to consider is just the role of Greg in the community and how you personally all feel about it. Tons of people are on board. I know some people aren't. At some point in the future, vaguely defined, when, because it's not really a priority, I want to do some kind of community survey to get people's feedback on Greg's role in the community, what it should or should not be. Not in terms of a kick Greg out thing, but more in terms of a what should Greg do kind of a thing. Okay, I see a lot of people proposing the idea of Greg should not add any more details to characters who there are going to be contests for. That's one threshold. Some people are like, Greg should not answer any more questions about the story. That's one threshold. There's all sorts of different points. It's very difficult to get any kind of coalition on what exactly people think. At some point, I'd be curious to know, because I do think we have no right to dictate what Greg does or doesn't do, but I do think his decision to do stuff, I think it would be affected by how people were feeling. I don't think it's fair to him to necessarily, do things as they always have been, and then people get livid, about a mace. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit of a departure from how things used to operate. Maybe the times are changing, maybe not, but we'll see.
Yeah.
For now, nothing's going to change, but it's just something to keep in the back of your minds.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We do have 2 more questions, Mesa. Did you want to?
Yeah, sure. We can do it real quick. One of them was from Sharnak, right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do him first. Genuine question, and please don't take this the wrong way, but will there be a potential end point for these contests? I support them, but I don't want them to continue until Greg retires from LEGO.
I mean, listen. That option has come up like twice now, like 3 different times. Like, we don't have we have a finite amount of characters in terms of what characters have been approved by Greg to have contests run.
Yeah.
So
if you want to get technical, that's your end point.
Yeah. But so is it possible that they would run till Greg retires? Yeah. It's also possible that the community decides they don't want any more contests. Yeah. Like, these things are both possible. We don't know. Like, we just don't.
At this point, we're operating based on feedback, participation, and the will of the community, and like the survey that Mask of Destiny ran.
Mm-hmm.
Feedback on our end is mostly good. There's people who have issue with how we've run things, which is fair and sometimes unfair, but it's critique basically. But overall, there's a large contingent of people who are happy that contests exist. The survey, that's part 2, that reinforced that, even though there was a lot of discussion about how they should be run. Most people did agree that they were good in some capacity. And then the third point was the participation. Up until this point, there's been a very steady stream of participation. A lot of people run with the narrative that the contests are decreasing in popularity. That's not true. Toahaga had more entries than Artaka did. If you want to get technical, they're gaining in popularity.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I don't throw that around because I know there's extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily say that they're gaining, but they've been remarkable. This is the discussion I also had on the boards with someone who they made a chart, and the chart basically showed what we already understood, which is retention in the contests is remarkably consistent. Like, there's been maybe a slight decline in the Artaka one, and then it increased in the Haga one. And it's like, yeah. So it's still remarkably consistent in terms of engagement. And we have plans to discuss some further changes with Mod whenever they get back to schedule with us, so that we can potentially increase that engagement.
It's hard to schedule with us because we're only free like 3 days out of the week.
So it's hard to schedule.
It is what it is.
It's hard to schedule with us when we don't hear anything back.
I know, but I'm sure that plays in. I told them it's like we're free Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and it's like, well, if that doesn't work this week, guess we're waiting until next week. Yeah. So we'll hopefully hear back soon.
Yeah,
we have some ideas. I'll put it to you this way, Sharnak. Do I want the contests to continue for necessarily like 10 years? Maybe not necessarily. I feel like after a while, at least to me, they might get boring. They might get dull. They haven't yet. The creativity people have shown, the outpouring of like cool things people have made, it shows that spark of like ingenuity and creativity is still there. Will they continue for that length of time? I don't know. Will they continue in the same way, in the same ownership, in the same operating style? Who can say? But right now, we're just going off the metrics that we have access to. And right now, it's full steam ahead with some caveats.
No, at least Swart's in contact with us.
True. Sword is cool.
Thank you, Sword.
The second question was from the AGL group, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you mentioned? Okay. So she says this. Greg canonizes from the contests with a pass/fail approval of the mock. Is there a conflict between taking Greg's word of God and making the major force of canonization come from the community? Because we now have questions of death of the author in the social media anecdotes and in fan designs being approved from Word of God.
What?
Which is two different things. So, what I presume they're saying, right? She's like, the social media anecdotes talking about death of the author is the rejection of the author's will, interpretation, ideas, etc. And Word of God is the author says what is what. And those two conflict with each other. And if I'm correct on that, I hope I am. I might be getting the definitions mixed up. The difference is we are not, the whole point of this podcast was not to advocate to use death of the author in reference to Greg Farshty.
Yeah, because it's not.
If there's any coherent point you could take from this, it's not really applicable.
Yeah.
At least not in the traditional way that people use it to reference other authors in literature, authors like J.K. Rowling, etc. In some cases, it can be, like I said, love is canon, other interpretations of things after the fact. But like I said earlier, the key defining point that separates Bionicle from other fandoms is the fact that Greg's involvement and participation is intrinsic. It's been here since 2003. If you got into the Bionicle fandom, you inevitably would come across Ask Greg topics or the Ask Greg ideology if you engaged on a super deep level. If you read the wiki, if you're on BZP, if you're super into like the story and the lore, you would engage with this. So I don't really support Death of the Author. I get why you would, and if people listen, I like that people enjoy our contests. I like that people participate in our contests. If you want to say screw the contests and screw Greg's like post yesterday quest canonizations and just enjoy Bionicle on your own merits, do so. It's not my goal to stop anyone or to have like, I don't know, some kind of arbitrary rule to say you cannot experience Bionicle in this way. That's entirely up to the personal jurisdiction of the person who makes that decision. But it's my view and my interpretation, and the view of many others in the community, that you can't really separate a strict canon from Bionicle and the Bionicle community. They're very intrinsically linked. At least a fraction of the fan base is. And if we operate on that ideology, then the canon contests are in line with that. Greg saying something about a character in years past is no different than Greg seeing a winning design and being like, thumbs up. And if we're on board with the former, then we're on board with the latter for consistency's sake. If we trust Greg that love isn't canon, if we're on board with that, then we're on board with this. That's what we mean. And that's the distinction. All this is just to express our own views. That says nothing of how you can view it. So, if you believe in Death of the Author, and you are looking at the contests and how their role plays in, you might have a conflict with Word of God, running into Death of the Author. That's a very valid point. But that's up to the personal interpretation and which philosophy you adhere to. And that's not my call to make for you. Or anyone, really. I hope that made sense. I tried. These topics are a little over my head when talking about the mace that a certain Toa, uses. They're very heady topics. But if you stretch it, if you stretch it, they are applicable. So sorry if I'm like using language that makes it difficult for people to follow. It's a little difficult for me to follow myself.
Well.
How you feeling, Eljay? Do you have any closing thoughts or ruminations before we wrap up?
Not terribly many. I think I've said mostly what I want to say. Like, all this stuff, it's just so much of it. It's all the time. And it feels like it was a lot easier back in the day. Like, I don't think BZP ever ran into these problems when they ran their contests. They just ran the contests, and everyone was excited, and they wanted to be a part of it. And they didn't want to, like, alter it or try and adjust things based on their agenda or their, perspective on the canonicity of whether or not Pohatu put his right foot forward or his left foot forward when he exited the Toa canister or stuff like that. It's like,
I think back then people just took it for granted.
I think so.
This was just how things were. And also, I think it hits people a little differently when the story was ongoing. Perhaps. I think people were a lot more willing to accept contests when they were in addition to actual written story, not as a replacement for it. That's the only explanation I can think of for the difference in reactions. Either that or it's just a different group of people engaging with it. Maybe the people that were totally on board for it aren't part of the community anymore. At least in the capacity they once were.
It's possible. I swear here is saying I know several people who hated canon contests when it came to mocks. That's why BZP canon stuff moved to stories, and BSO1 moved to art shortly after. That's possible. It's very possible. Like, fair enough. I wouldn't know. It just, that's how I perceived it. All I know is this. I'm gonna now need to since there are some people who are claiming that like we're abusing our privilege, we're abusing our position.
That's a whole thing we didn't even get into.
Yeah, we don't really need to. By asking Greg the very deliberate and leading questions such as, hey, do the Yesterday Quest Toa have tools? To which we obviously knew and engineered so that he would answer specifically with those exact same weapon types. Since we're doing that, and I guess we can't go back from that, I guess there's really nothing stopping me from just sending him an email and being like, hey, Liwa sounds like me, right? And then him being like, yeah, absolutely, canon, boom. And then I win, and everyone else wins. And I guess that's just really the only direction we have moving forward.
Eljay, go home.
I am home. I'm not home. I'm on the island of Matanui, Meso.
Oh my god.
Because again, I am Liwa. I have to abuse that power now.
You're a clown.
Hong Kong.
I'm gonna read this last comment from Google account. They'll never do canon contests for locations.
No, absolutely not.
I can't tell if you're joking or not.
No.
If you're joking, well done. That's funny. But I'm gonna assume you're not joking, and I'm just gonna treat it seriously and play it straight. No, we have zero interest in ever doing any contests that aren't visuals for characters with really important roles, or at the very least speaking lines, or at the very least like Marindar, we're gonna have an important role. That's it.
The criteria we went with was characters that were either named or had a speaking role, or both.
Yeah,
that was the distinction.
We're not going to do contests for the Toa Mangai of Ice. We're not going to do canon contests for stories. We're not going to do canon contests for mask powers or weapon powers. And God forbid, definitely not locations. That is a rabbit hole which I am not fully prepared to fall into, and I really have no interest in falling into it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know if that was serious, but I'm just going to treat it as such. No. LJ, you want to read the super chat?
Absolutely. Trevor Samora donated $20 with this message: obligatory money for a thanks for your time, thoughts, and voices. Love is canon, technically, etc. Yay, Bionicle, and have a nice evening. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. And for listening to this ramble.
Yeah.
I didn't have a cogent point to make throughout all this because, like I said, this is a complicated issue to even unpack. I don't fully expect any of you to have all your thoughts mapped out. Just think about it. Think about where do you draw the line if you draw the line.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fun to explore that, like what is too far and what is totally chill. Because I think everybody has their own different line.
And now I'm going to add on to it as we wrap up. Jasper Shiba in the YouTube chat said, green male vortex who died on the mountain while climbing with Udaka cannon contest win. I hate to break it to you, but the actual color of that armor was black because no vortex wore any other color but black, so the green was actually just an artistic choice to differentiate him from Udaka. So anyway.
Wait, what?
It's
no vortex wears armor but black.
It's canon.
I don't know this. That's true.
Here, it's on the BSL1 page. Let's see in the trivia. Although Rudaka's vortex climbing partner, shown in Shadowplay, appears green in color, all vortex actually wear black armor. And this is from Chapter 7, Zia, Inhabitants, from Bionicle World. The book released in 2007.
What?
It's not even just an offhanded great canonization.
What on earth? What kind of just? Okay, never mind. I do fully support death of the author.
No.
I take back everything I said. Everything I said. What? Why would they only have black armor? That's so weird. All right. Well, that's all I got. I'm done after that. That's bizarre. Would you mind doing the plugs, Eljay?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hopefully. Oh, wait, we do have one more super chat.
Oh.
From Evershadow7, I believe. Yes. $5. Message. Didn't catch all of the stream, but just got to say love y'all so much and stay safe, everyone. Thank you so very much. We really do appreciate it. All right.
What on earth?
It's time to wrap. So thank you all so very much for listening. If you're interested in joining in further in the conversation, head on over to the TTV message boards at board.ttvchannel.com. You need to be 13 years or older, agree to the rules and terms of service, and you'll have a good time. If you're interested in further support, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/theTTVchannel, where you can join our TTV Patreon Discord server for as low as $1 a month, as well as our Minecraft server. Additionally, consider Super Chats. They really do help us out and go a long way, allowing us to help make content such as every Bionicle set ever. Channel funds.
Here comes the plug.
Channel funds were put into that video, and support from people like you made it possible. So thank you. Finally, head on over to Twitter at the TTV channel, at Messinac, and at the LJ Johnson, JOHNSEN.
Please be sure to smash that like button.
Oh yeah, and smash that like button. Don't forget to ring that bell to join our notification cannon crew. That's right, everyone. You can be a part of the cannon crew too, like Woo's crew, but cannon.
I don't want our fan base to be the cannon crew. That is not the reputation I want. Oh,
we don't really have like a very. I don't know what our Bionicle fans. Gathered friends is wildly misleading.
Yeah, we're not all friends. We actually all hate each other. From political battle lines.
AGL Group says TTVG fuel sponsorship win. Never.
Oh man.
Why would you ever put that toxin in your body? We're sponsored by natural water. Fresh.
I'm sponsored by McAllister's Sweet Tea. If you have a McAllister's Deli in your area, go get the tea pass. It's $8 a month for unlimited sweet tea.
Gosh,
you can get a glass a day, and then you can get refills. I drink 5 glasses a day. I'm pretty sure my body is like 80% sweet tea by this point.
No, it's 80% sugar. That is very unhealthy.
I'm going to end this with two more things people said. Number one, Zen... YT, Zen, whatever, they can't even have a secondary color. Is that they really can't?
I don't know. It only said black armor. That's all I know. I have nothing more I can offer.
And then finally by Jasper Shiba, well, now we need that canon contest to fix his art on BSO1. And you know what? He's right. It's an inaccuracy. Canon contest for the green, actually black vortex.
No, we're done. Thank you all so very much for watching.
Right.
I'm going to start the music.
Do it, by all means. Thank you all for coming, streaming to you from a golden beach. Wait, I messed up the order. I'm Meso.
I'm LJ.
This was back in J.